That's where they're sending her.
They're sending her to the DMZ. They just sent Nancy Pelosi up there too. Jeez. They're like, let's get. Hey, fucking, you never know. They might do it for us.
Well, the crazy thing was her going to when she went to Taiwan.
Yeah, with a bag of diamonds. They told her.
Joe Biden, how insane this is. And this has happened like so many times where he'll just say something, and he says literally the most insane thing in the world. Like, he just came out and changed the one China policy, which is the most reckless thing. It's right up there with the stuff that he's doing with Ukraine and Russia. You go, dude, you can't just say that the policy is to overthrow Vladimir Putin, dude. That's like a huge thing to say. And then they come out and they go, the White House issued a statement that their policy has not changed. And you're like, who's the White House?
And what's this president?
Is it the chief of staff?
Right,
is it the vice president? Is it his wife? Who's the White House? He's the head of the White House. So he comes out the other day and just says, and the whole point, the whole point of the one China policy is basically, and this is actually one thing that was smart, strategic U.S. foreign policy, is that they basically went, okay, so we recognize China. Okay, this is your area, China. But, we also like Taiwan. And we'd also like to see a reunification, and we kind of like it to all be peaceful. And we're very ambiguous about where we stand. Because the problem is, if you were to come out and say what Joe Biden just said the other day, he goes, oh, if China invaded Taiwan, we would send in the military. Well, the problem with that is, like, that might be the encouragement Taiwan needs to go, okay, then we declare independence. And if they declare independence, China will invade Taiwan. And then, holy shit. And by the way, all of our Navy war games say that we lose that war.
Look at this. China sparks new Taiwan invasion fears with threat to crush anyone who tries to stop its reunification with the self-governing island after Biden kowtowed to Beijing at UN.
Well,
that's why having a guy like him in office is fucking dangerous.
And this is what they said about Trump.
But that's legitimately dangerous, man. And I got a lot of shit about this when I had Eric Weinstein on. I was like, I can't vote for Biden. I'd vote for Trump before I'd vote for Biden. And the reason being is that, you knew this. You knew he was deteriorating. Forget about his policies when he was lucid.
Yeah.
Forget about he was lucid during the Obama administration. You barely heard from him.
Yeah, he was much, much better. If you listen to a speech he gave in 2012 or 2013, he has lost several steps.
See, regardless of what you think about his policies, as a human that's in a position of extreme stress and power, that is nuts. That's nuts. That's nuts.
It's really unbelievable.
That's insane. He's so far gone.
And I mean, look, that this was the knock on Donald Trump is well, he'll say reckless things. But I mean, what is more reckless than just and the crazy thing about it, even Henry Kissinger came out recently and was talking about how insane this whole Ukraine policy is. Because he's like, well, what do you do? Is the plan here that we're going to provoke Russia and China? We're going to provoke nuclear conflict with the two countries who you just don't want to have a nuclear conflict with. And, whatever anyone says, and I know there's some some of the kind of populist right-winger types who are real China hawks and are really concerned about China. But the truth is that neither one of these countries pose a military threat to America. It's just there's just no way. There's no way that they pose a military threat to us. Does China pose a military threat to Taiwan? Perhaps you could argue that. Although the peace has been kept for many decades now, but perhaps you can argue they pose a threat to them. But they don't pose a threat to us. And the idea that we're trying to find it's just so bananas that you go, okay, so we have 20 years of the war on terrorism, which is basically at this point almost nobody even argues that it was anything short of a disaster. I mean, I saw Bill Kristol debate Scott Horton, who's incredible. Everyone should check him out. Scott Horton at antiwar.com. And he debated him in New York City. And one of the people in the crowd asked a question of Bill Kristol, neocon #1 guy. And he goes, what was the last U.S. Intervention that was successful? And I think he said, I can't remember if he said, he ever said Kosovo or something like that, maybe Bosnia. I can't remember which one he said. But even he didn't try to defend any of the interventions of the 21st century. He didn't even try to say, he couldn't even look this kid who asked him the question, look him in the eye and go, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan. Like, no, he couldn't. He couldn't even tell them. So we have 20 years of just disastrous wars, at least a couple million, innocent people dead. Not to mention, I don't know, what, 50,000 of our soldiers who have blown their brains out after they came back from these wars, a few thousand who died in the battles, and trillions of dollars wasted, nothing to show for it. And finally, we end the longest one, the war in Afghanistan, and we're finally kind of moving toward like, okay, we kind of recognize that this is wrong. So let's start provoking a war with Russia. And how about China too? Like, what the it's like what you were talking about at the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then you're like, oh, good, we don't have to be at war no more. And you're like, Saddam Hussein, we got to go fight this guy now. We're just always trying to find the next war. And I'd say this is potentially even stupider than that, because the Biden guys, they're talking about Putin like he's Saddam Hussein, like he's Muammar Gaddafi. Like we could just tell him what to do and he has to fucking do it. But he doesn't, because he's sitting on the biggest nuclear arsenal in the history of the world, second only to ours.
I think his is first.
Actually, might be first. Yes, actually might be first.
I thought ours was the biggest. But
yes, I think you're right about that.
But it's kind of a moot point because
we can all destroy the world many times over. Yes.
And
but
then
like
there's the threat of hypersonic weapons.
Yeah.
That apparently he has.
That's what he says.